All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. It looks like it's been fantastic. So good job to the team. What I would like to do over the next 20 minutes or so, just to give you an overview of what we've been doing within Johnson&Johnson on accelerating our digital journey, particularly within the context of the COVID and the pandemic that we've been dealing with collectively over the past 2 years, almost 2 years. So my name is Sultan Aziz. I am part of Johnson&Johnson supply chain at an enterprise level, and I look after the portfolio of innovation products and programs. So as a company, as most of you or all of you probably are aware of Johnson&Johnson, we're the most broad-based healthcare company, and we operate in 3 different sectors. So you can see consumer products, some of which you're probably familiar with. Of course, our pharmaceuticals, and last but not least, our medical devices, which got several franchises within that organization. Just a brief mention of our credo that has been around, and it's our North Star, our guiding light, if you will. It defines how we interact with our patients, doctors, nurses, communities, employees, and stockholders. And our purpose is to blend science and ingenuity to profoundly change the trajectory of health for humanity. That's a guiding principle. And a little bit about our supply chain, because we are somewhat different than most companies when we talk about supply chain. Within J&J's supply chain, it's not only where we make our product, but our environmental health and safety, our quality organization, our distribution, our procurement, they're all part of the supply chain. It's a large organization. J&J has roughly north of 130,000 employees. And under the leadership of Kathy Wengel, there's 65,000 plus, maybe a little bit north of that within supply chain. We are operating in 115 J&J manufacturing sites, as you can see on the numbers. This may be a little bit dated. J&J has 250 operating companies. We are dealing with roughly 3,000 suppliers across the world, manage over 100,000 orders a day, 290,000 customers, and a significant number of external partners, which is roughly around 600. So just to give you a little bit of a breadth and complexity of the J&J's environment. I brought this slide just to speak a little bit about what has been going on. This is a slide, it's a little dated from Accenture from 2016. But the world is changing, and I think we've all been experiencing that. So we are moving from industrial economy to a digital economy, which is the topic of the conversations that we've been having over the past couple of days. We're going from a power controlling supply chain to a power optimizing the ecosystem in terms of how we plan, source, make, and deliver. In terms of digital assets, how do we think about our capital investment? What is the ecosystem within an organization and outside of a company like Johnson&Johnson? And what is the impact of digital density and understanding what is changing in our space in healthcare in particular? And to that point, if we've done a little bit of a cloud word searching, and if what is going on, pay for value is a big deal, right? Traceability, sustainability, clearly regulatory environment is continuing to put pressure on us from a cost and market access. Personalization, customization is not surprising. Most of us want our product today when we want it, wherever we may be. Future of work in terms of making sure that we have the resources and the skills to deal with digital and digital data analytics, digital sciences, etc. Is a component of how we think about accelerating our digital journey. And so you see, I'm not going to read all of this, and of course there's market consolidation, there are external pressures, tax, trade, etc. Where we've been focusing over the past 5 years, and one of the enabling capabilities that we put in place when the pandemic hit, I think we were very fortunate that we had made investments several years ago, and they came to fruition. I'll give you some examples of what those are. But before I get there, our supply chain innovation and the vision and strategy is all about delivering unmatched customer experience to drive growth through a supply chain innovation. So for us, supply chain is really a new business model and a disruptor. focusing on our customers and consumers, we think about three dimensions. We're thinking about our customers, we think about the health ecosystem, we think about a supply chain. And in particular, making sure that we have a reliable, smart, agile, adaptive, and sustainable supply chain. And how do we do this? So if you think about all of what I just said, it's easier said than done. We're leveraging supply chain as a service. We're thinking about agile, flexible supply chain, and I'll give you some examples of what that means, and in making sure that we're responsive, we're resilient, irrespective of what will happen. There will be another pandemic, hopefully not until several hundred years from today, but we know for sure it will hit us. So how do we think about that? We want to make sure that we are digitally connected. We want to make sure we have an infrastructure in place from a digital capability, data analytics, data science to support our data extraction, to deliver to the promise that we have made to the world. And within that, we had to make sure that we have an operating model in place within Johnson&Johnson to create a single point of accountability, that we have a process for stage of innovation. And you see on the bottom of this slide, on the right-hand side, where we think about what we call it test and learn. So we're saying, what is the problem that we want to solve? Internally, externally. How do we explore opportunities outside of J&J? How do we develop the capabilities? And how do we go through a governance process to make sure there's a single point of accountability? And I'll come back towards the end of this presentation, talk a little bit about that, because it is critical as we think about it, and as you should think about it in your environment, making sure that you have a process to execute effectively. So supply chain as a service, there are various components of this. So curated healthcare to deliver your personal terms and routines, end-to-end smart healthcare and integrated supply chain. I'll give you an example of what this is. Agile, flexible supply chain. We are moving from sort of fixed asset to a flexible, mobile, modular systems. So I'll make that real over the next couple of slides. And that also gives us the ability to be responsive and resilient. And what do we get out of this if we do this effectively? Well, for our customers, they will have access and a positive experience and outcomes. They will be seamlessly provided. We will be smartly connected. We will be agile, resilient. And last but not least, from a business impact, our supply chain capabilities will drive growth, will be reliable, will be responsive. And certainly, as the outcome of all of this, we would expect cost and efficiency productivity measures. Now, in terms of the COVID situation, and I know this slide is a little dated, or the content here is a little dated, but when the COVID hit, and as you know, particularly within the US and probably other parts of the world, we leverage our 3D printing center of excellence to create ventilator splitters. So Vesper is the company we work with Prisma Health to create a ventilator splitter that would, due to the shortage. It did have, an emergency authorization used by the regulatory agency, the FDA in the US, and has been pulled out, since August of 28. The point of the matter is that we leveraged the investments that we had made in our 3D printing center of excellence to actually provide a benefit to the society that was badly needed. So that's just an example of how our investments are providing some benefits clearly and well recognized. The other products, in terms of what we've done from a customer centricity, how we think about our, the pre-synthesized medical devices, that we are making a product that is specific to the customer, to the consumer. We could see the picture up on top here, capturing the image. The product is tailor-made, it's printed on site, it's personalized for that patient. And similarly, on the bottom, it's a little outdated, but it's not specific to the pandemic, but nonetheless, it speaks to the abilities that we've created to create a face mask under the Neutrogena product that has got embedded medicine in it to deliver some benefit for the customer in terms of, whether somebody has acne, whether blemishes, etc. I want to talk a little bit about what we call flexible modular mobile manufacturing system. This is really, the pandemic is accelerated. So we've been working on this kind of a capability. We're moving from a fixed asset, bespoke assets to a future that is modular, that's mobile, that you could have factory in a box, create agility and flexibility. It certainly creates resiliency. It will drive significantly our cost and cash improvements. It will be localized, and it could provide customization for products that you could create of N of 1, N of 5, N of 10, etc., versus the way we are making our products today. And clearly it would be, asset lightness. So that means from a capex investment or investment, we were looking forward to having less of a depreciation, etc. But what the pandemic has done in this particular case is actually accelerating our decision making within Johnson & Johnson. It is creating the ability for us to leverage external expertise and bring those expertise in-house in a much faster space than we would have had in the past. And we have multiple deployments across our three segments that I referenced: in consumer, in medical devices, and certainly in our pharmaceuticals across the world. Another example, I'm going to jump through this, but I want to talk a little bit about our foundational capabilities. So we have, as I mentioned, we have invested significantly in our digital stack, in our operational layer, in our data layer, of creating insights. We have a digital and data science organization that is in place, and an enterprise that bring the capabilities that we want to make sure we are leveraging across these three segments, so every single sector is not creating their own digital data analytics capability, but is centralized with core capabilities. This has been critical in terms of our data extractions, data analytics, and data visualization. A little bit about the process. It's important that I talked about, when we put what we used to call manufacturing for the future several years ago, that we have a defined process, an innovation process, from defining what the problem statement is, understanding, do we have the capabilities internally? If we do not have the capabilities internally, we would go outside, making sure that we have a methodology in terms of testing those capabilities, leveraging significant amount of opportunities externally. And then if those tests are successful, we will go and deploy either within a site or across multiple sites. Just critical as we think about in our space, this has been foundational elements of the success that we have recognized so far. There are various steering committees. I won't go through all of these, but you could see that there is a steering committee that's focused on our end-to-end scouting and sourcing, steering committee that looks at our testing, the governance in terms of test and scale. And then we have leadership teams that is supported through our supply chain academy. But all of this is enabled through the digital stack and digital council to make sure we think about our data, we think about the infrastructure of the data, where the source of the data, and understanding process characterization, or how we make our products to successfully leverage that data, whether you're feeding it back into the machine layer, using it for data analytics, the digital performance management, asset optimization, etc. I won't go through this slide. There's just a steering committee in terms of how we think about. There are innovation execution teams on the bottom, and you see they're very focused on digital performance management, asset optimization, supplier connectivity, given that we work with close to 600 suppliers, right? And they're focused on many components of sort of Industry 4.0 digital capabilities. One thing I want to mention, and this has been a critical, so we've been working on smart glasses, Google Glasses, etc., you name it, over the past 4 years. As the pandemic hit, the adoption of smart glasses to provide real-time video connections, to provide their ability for quality inspection, digital inspection, safety audits. You see the list on the bottom, the use cases, trainings, leveraging smart glasses to do tech transfer, etc. It got dramatically accelerated because of the pandemic. And that, we're continuing on that path, and has been very beneficial. So that's an example of a technology adoption. There was a little bit of a push, honestly, from the top down when the pandemic hit, and we couldn't send people, or couldn't send our, different experts, whether they're external or internal, to different sites. We leveraged this capability to make sure we had no disruptions in many of the components of things that we do that is listed here. And just a couple of last slides. I'll just speak to these, and I'll go click through them. So first and foremost, for us, we wanted to make sure that we have a strategy as we thought about applications or adoption of Industry 4.0. We needed to make sure there's a robust business case. The value was clearly articulated. We have a leadership. We put an enterprise leader to where I belong to, as I mentioned. Make sure there's an accountability and deep engagement across our sectors, given the complexity of what I just talked about. We've done a significant amount of benchmarking with external business partners to understand what was going on outside of the four walls of J&J. And then making sure that the implementation, where we're thinking big, starting small, proving the value, proving the scaling quickly through our Johnson&Johnson operating system and Johnson&Johnson production system that has been around for a very, very long time. So that foundational capability from a governance perspective, from deployment perspective, has been critical. From an enablers, clearly we have a Johnson&Johnson Supply Chain Academy, culture and capabilities that is bringing training, significant training and new learnings into the environment. So that skill building has been very critical. Making sure I talked about the agile data infrastructure and IoT platform. We spent significant amount of resources and investments to make sure that's in place. It is taking us a while. So working with our IT organization, a critical enabler. And then, making sure that there is a sense of urgency in terms of deploying it and not getting into the purgatory of testing forever. So it's critical that we needed to make sure that we have a stage gate for go, no-go decisions. And then the last slide for us, starting with the customer, understanding the business needs and the opportunities, making sure that we are focusing on the customer centricity, innovation focus on what the customer needs are, however we want to define the customer, has been critical. I talked about the innovation process, the playbook that enables that, the engine that we have in place, robust governance, and leveraging the global innovation ecosystem, whether it's through World Economic Forum. And we are very, very proud that Johnson&Johnson has 7 lighthouses, one of the only company with 7 lighthouses. But what I'm trying to say to you is that leveraging the external ecosystem through, participating in a conference such as this, working with the World Economic Forum, other consortium, etc., for us has been critical. So I think that's the last slide that I had for this presentation. Let me stop, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to field it now, or we'll be happy to take it offline as needed. Let me see, I think there's some questions. No, okay.
Thanks a lot, Sultan, for the presentation. Yeah. I will check quickly with Sabrina. Are there any questions from the... Okay, Sultan, I have a question to you. Life science historically is not really seen as a very innovative or early adopter industry. It's more like conservative. And you mentioned things about like Google glasses and so on. And I remember when I talked to some customers, they were like saying, well, we are really now willing to adopt this. Either we were forced into it because of the pandemic situation, but you know what? Some of the technology we are now willing to use maybe not fit for clean room applications. So have you seen now that suppliers are willing to invest to also support you now who, historically conservative industry, now really changing willingness to adopt?
Yeah, I think it's a partnership. So we're seeing, in terms of making sure that OEMs, if we couldn't send someone to go fix a machine, wherever that machine was, leveraging smart glasses, View 6, Google glasses, you name it, it doesn't matter who the manufacturer is. Yes, that partnership it's coming through, and I think there's an opportunity to really start thinking of that more and more, right? So we got a ways to go. You're right. I think it is predominantly has been a very conservative type of, it is regulated. So that's part and parcel of this. But, we need to think about this holistically and drive to action where we see a lack of, if there is no robust cooperation, how do we collectively drive that? So we are after that. I think working with various, providers, governmental agencies, regulatory agencies, etc. There's more to do.
Thank you. And you just pointed out to the regulatory bodies like FDA, EMA, Swissmedic, and so on. Maybe that's really something we should also consider, to bring these people into conferences like this, right? And it's not the first time I hear that even people like FDA are now making recommendations, right? Why don't you do things differently than in the past, which is for me also a big surprise. They were more like even more conservative, but now they seem to also see that we need to change to be able to...
Absolutely. 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 I mean, one of the things that we have done in terms of, so we talk about applications of technology for real-time release, right? So in our case, in our pharmaceutical business, we have a couple of our products that are getting tested as they go through the production steps. But as you're testing those products, as they're going through the various steps and having a conversation with regulatory agencies in EMEA or FDA and other parts of the world, we have received some approval, but that just takes time and efforts to share the knowledge and provide some guidance and direction. So I think, yes, we could do more collectively.
Good, thank you. That's all from my side. No further questions from the audience here and remote. So thank you again for this presentation today, and also your support yesterday through the panel discussion.
It was a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sabrina.
Very good. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day. Thanks. Bye-bye.